Hello, this is a recording based on uh, some effort that I put in over this weekend. It was basically 7, 8 months in the making. Unfortunately, I just got derailed by a whole bunch of things. But one of the things I've wanted to do is convert this great course, ASP.NET Core 2.0 e-commerce website based on microservices. It's by Frank Oz, and it is one of the best courses I've ever taken because the Frank is definitely a guru on this. And what I loved about this course was it's totally a real-world example. I mean, it gives you a lot of advanced features. In fact, it's probably even more advanced than many of the applications that you would actually work in a particular job where you're actually getting paid to do. Uh, Far too often, a lot of these courses that you take across different online video sources, they're very good courses, but far too often they stop short in terms of real world business stuff. But this course goes way beyond that and actually gives you a full industrial strength application. Having said that, this is just a precursory video. I'm going to make another one. I've got to be honest, I got this to finally work in a Kubernetes cluster. That was the main thing I wanted to do, was try to take the Docker Compose files that were provided in the course and try to see if I can turn the whole thing into Kubernetes. And as you can see, I've done that right here. So I actually have this whole application running in several pods with some scaling here. So I've actually got 2 of the web MVC services. I spun up 2 of the token servers just to kind of have fun with it a little bit. I got to be honest, though, a lot of this was crude. It was my first attempt in doing this, and I ran into a lot of struggles along the way. I'll probably go ahead and make another video and clean things up dramatically so that this can actually be checked in for anybody else that might want to go ahead and do something here. But as you can see right here, this is actually the application running, and it's actually running on a Kubernetes cluster, so it's no longer running in the context of Docker Compose. I actually have this running on my Mac, but you can run it on Windows. And no, I haven't attempted to even spin this up into the cloud. That's something, I'll leave for an exercise for another day possibly. But the main thing was just get all this stuff converted over to Kubernetes. So there was a couple of gotchas. And first of all, how did I do this? So I took the Docker Compose file, and basically, now I got to be honest with you, this Docker Compose file is no longer going to really, I took the original one that you start up with Docker, and where it creates a Docker network, and I changed it a bunch just to try, not really a bunch, but I changed it a little bit just to try to get this working in Kubernetes. So I got to be honest, what I have right now with this Docker Compose file probably won't work in Docker anymore, but that's not to say I couldn't get it up and running and convert it over again. And what I mean, it probably won't work if I did a Docker Compose up or a down. So I just, went straight forward into Kubernetes. What I want to do, my first goal is just get it over into Kubernetes. Even if I break it where I can't do a Docker Compose anymore, that's okay. Docker Compose up, that's okay, because that's my next step, is to go ahead and change this ever so slightly so that I can, spin up a full-blown Docker network the way the course is working, or I can go and do it through Kubernetes. So I sort of cheated a little bit. I have a directory called Compose with a K, and where I'm going with that is if you do a search for Docker Compose, I kind of cheated a little bit, but basically if you say Docker Compose, I went to Compose.io. It's an open source project. Apparently, a lot of people are using it, but the whole thing about that is it'll go ahead and convert your Docker Compose YAML file, and it'll convert it as much as it possibly can over to Kubernetes. So you can do a compose convert, which is what I did. And so I ran compose convert on this Docker YAML file, and it ended up creating a whole bunch of these YAMLs right here. And it did a really good job with it. But that's not to say I didn't have to go into each and every one of these. As a matter of fact, I did have to go pretty much into each and every one of these and change these ever so slightly in order to get this to work in my cluster. But as you can see, I'm just kind of scrolling through these right here. So this one Docker Compose actually ended up creating, like the basket data deployment, the cart service, the catalog deployment, the MS SQL Server, the order service, the RabbitMQ. Um, you know, again, this is very rudimentary, and I plan to clean this up a little bit. But as you can see, I wrote a startup script here, which will, I have a cleanup and a startup. So the cleanup is basically going to delete all my services, and then the startup is going to go ahead and apply all my deployments and services, so that if I do a kubectl git pods, you can see they're starting right here. You can see I've got some scaling going, so because I actually have 2 WebMVC pods, and I've got 2 token server pods, so that's being orchestrated. One of the other key things is in order to get this to go in the Kubernetes, I've got a build script, but I'm also pushing to my Docker hub. So I actually have a shell basically that's going to push all of these up to my Docker hub, these images. If I go to Docker hub, for example, there's our Docker hub, and I'm already logged in to my own repository. And as you can see, when I'm doing the build, basically, I'm uploading, order, card, MVC, catalog, token service, Redis, and all that kind of stuff. I actually retagged the images so that I could push them to my own repository. So that this used to be called shoes order, but now it's tcosic order. So that's kind of like a little mini snag because of my deploy processes. So I'm building these images, and then I'm actually doing a push. Again, there's probably a better way of doing this. This is just my first goal over the weekend was get this all running within the cluster, even if it's not the most ideal way, and then try to backtrack yourself. So what I actually have is, if you look here, here's my home directory. My shoes on container solutions inside of here. So as you can see, here's my shoes on container solution that I happen to be in with all the different projects. So, normally I was working on Windows, but on this one I was kind of working on the Mac because I was having a problem getting Minikube working on Windows. So one of the other things I did want to mention on the Mac here, you can see I've got Docker installed here. I'm actually not using Minikube, even though I have Minikube installed. The newest version of Docker actually has Kubernetes bundled into it. And the nice thing about that, though, is you can use the Docker stack command, which I tried using and got that to work. And the Docker stack command allows you to actually deploy your Docker application, your Docker Compose. It'll actually allow you to deploy it into Kubernetes. But ultimately might not be the ideal way to go. I really wanted to, that's kind of like a development thing, get the thing up and running kind of a deal. But if you install the latest version of Docker, you get Kubernetes with it. And so I'm actually running that one. So as a matter of fact, just to show you, if I say Docker config, git context, I think it's git context, or it's git context. I think it's Docker config git context. 1 second. I think it's context. Well, I had it partially right. It's not Docker config, it's kubectl config. Shame on me. I have Docker in the brain right now. So it's git dash context. And if you look here, I've actually got, I've got Minikube, which I don't have started up, but this Docker desktop is the one that I'm actually pointing to right now. Right here, if you go to your Docker and you go to your cube, here you can also switch your context just by doing that. But that's just something, just kind of nice to know if you want to download Docker. The other thing too is, like I said, you've got the deployment dashboard that you can log into. And in order to do that, I actually had to start up a proxy right here. As you can see, I'm starting up my proxy. And then you actually have to get a token to log in. And I can show how to do that in a future video. But basically, these are all the deployments. And these are all of the pods that you have. So for each one of these pods, you can click on them and kind of get a dealie here on the environment variables that are being passed in. Oh, and that is the other thing. I wanted to get into some gotchas on how to do it, but apparently for the tokens server to work, I actually had to have that exposed, that particular port. So what I mean by that is if you say kubectl get service, if you look close, the external IP, I had to expose the external IP for both the token server and the WebMVC in order for us to reach out to the token server and get the token when you log in and get a valid token, basically. And I fronted that with a load balancer so that, again, that's in, if you take a look at token server dash service, oops, my code completion apparently is not working right there. Yeah, I just want to say token server dash service. And the way to do that is with the load balancer. So there's a couple of changes I had to make. Like I said, when you run Docker Compose, you don't get these load balancer. All of your services are basically internal, so you have to manually turn some of these on by making some of the switches. The other major, now I consider this kind of major thing, is in the WebMVC, what I had to do, and like I say, I want to actually get this working so that I can eventually run a Docker Compose up again. My environment variables, a lot of these, like the catalog URL, the cart URL, the order URL, these values here are basically the names of the services. So when you're running these services in a cluster, so for example, let's do this again. If I show you the services, I'm just going to say kubectl get service. If you take a look at the server names, service, not server, service names right here on the left-hand side, you got cart, catalog, MSSQL, order. So these are the things that I gave. I gave these names to it, actually. So, and let's see here. As you can see right here, so the name of that is cart. That, like right here, these names themselves have to match what we've got going on here in our deployments. Oops. Apparently I got it open in another window. I'm just kind of bouncing all over the place. So these names here, these environment variables that I'm passing here, like the cart URL, these are the service names, and you precede them with HTTP. Now, I have not messed around with certificates in the clusters. I'm not going to go that far. That's usually something that a Kubernetes administrator would do. From a developer standpoint, and for the purpose of this course, I feel what I've got here is way more than sufficient. This allows you to, get all this stuff up and running in a Kubernetes cluster where you can actually scale up and scale down your pods and stuff like that. The other major thing that I have to admit is the identity URL it wasn't enough. I couldn't say localhost 5000. Now, when you're running in Docker Compose up, you can say localhost 5000 because of the bridge network that gets created, but there is no concept of a bridge network and such in a Kubernetes cluster, so everything's running within the context of a cluster and pods and interpod communication with services. I actually, the problem is that if I put localhost in here, I was getting an error, which was it could not find the well-formed, I think it was like an identity document or something like that. I actually had to find my IP address, my physical IP address, or a domain name if I had one, and actually put it in here. That was like the only way to actually get this to work. There might be another way to do this, but as of right now, that's something to keep in mind. So this IP address is going to have to change depending on the environment that you're in. Again, time permitting or whatever, that might be something worth looking into, but this works. It's not ideal, but it works for now. So here I'm going to actually demo how I would actually go into the my dashboard. So here you actually, what you got to do is you got to start up your proxy. But first of all, let me just close out of here just so that you can see the steps. So I closed out of the dashboard application. And so what you got to do is you got to do a kubectl proxy. And then based on that proxy, of course, I've got the link saved right here. You go right here and bring up port 8001. Let's see what we got here. Paste that in. And then what you're going to do is you're going to get presented. Let's see here. It actually brought it in. There's actually a way to log out. I'm going to sign out right now. Because initially, when you haven't gone into the dashboard, when you try to bring up that link, you're going to get this Kubernetes dashboard thing here where it won't let you get to the dashboard unless you sign in. You can sign in with a token, which is what I'm going to do right here. And the way to do that is you can run this command right here. So I actually created a sample user with this link, and it's just something that you have to do once. And then you can run this particular command right here in a different window, which is what I'm going to do to get your token. And as you can look down here, you get the token. So you got to paste this in here. Let me put it in here. Now, once I sign in, I'm thrown right back here again. Now, what I want to do is just demonstrate, and this is really bare bones, primitive. Again, you can create this cluster with Terraform and all that kind of stuff, but this is not the ideal DevOpsy way of doing this. But I actually, if I go to my Compose directory, and again, this was just something that I started on over the weekend, put in quite a bit of time, probably took me about a good 12 hours or so to figure all this stuff out. And that's with a lot of courses that I've taken in Kubernetes in the past, and it was still kind of a pain. So not the world's easiest stuff, but now that we've got this here, it seems like it's fairly repeatable. So what I just ran was a cleanup, and if I do a kubectl get pods, I still got my token server. I'm actually going to change this. I'm going to say cleanup, because I'm actually going to go ahead and delete everything right here. So I'm going to say I want to delete my deployments here for the token server. Bear with me here. Okay, so I'm going to say kubectl delete deployment. I'm going to say basically, I'm going to keep my RabbitMQ and the SQL Server ones running. And the reason I'm going to do that is just simply because, you just want to do a delete deployment of token server. And you also want to delete your service. Delete service. And then if you say kubectl get service, I'm going to leave the SQL Server one running just because it takes a little bit of time to start up. So as you can see, those are the services that we have left running here. And if you say kubectl get deployments, there we go, right there. Now if we refresh our window here, lo and behold, we only have 2 pods running. So now I'm going to actually start these up again. And by the way, I actually have a build process that each one of these, like if I make a change to my catalog or my cart service, I have a build cart, all these different things in my parent directory. As you can see, I'm just kind of basically doing it brute force, Docker build, tagging it, and then I'm pushing the image over to my Docker hub, and then I'm deleting deployment in the server, then I'm going in my compose directory and reapplying that. So I've kind of got that going. Each one of these, this is how I've been actually able to build my cart catalog orders and in my web MVC. Let's see what else we got. So let's start up the services again. So now I'm actually starting up everything again. And as you can see, the startup, basically applying for each one of those, it's applying our deployments and our services, and it's also exposing, you know, kind of running a command right here to expose my web MVC as a type load balancer. It's just a different way of doing that. I was doing it a totally different way in the token server. So if I said service, so right here you can see I've got type load balancer right up there. And if I do a service, you know, I could go in here and make this a type load balancer as well. I'm not starting this up right now. So this web MVC service YAML is kind of a dead YAML file for now, simply because I'm doing the alternative to that just by exposing this, which is going to expose it on port 80. So let me show you. Get service. This is a key right here. So the web MVC one right now is running on port 80, and our token server is running on port 5000. And if I go ahead and rerun my 196, since I've got the pod up and running right here again, you can see I can log in. And I just logged in right now, so I've got no orders, I've got a cart. I'm just going to add a couple thingies to the cart just to test this out. So now you can see I've got 2 items in the cart. I want to do this, and I just want to say update. I want to check out. Let's see here. So, you know, I'm just doing some test stuff right here. I don't really care about a credit card number because I can short circuit this. I didn't make that required, just for testing. And then if I just do a pay and place order, as you can see, I've got that going right here. And then of course we've got our order. So I can click on the detail and see the order. And, you know, again, I can go back to the catalog, or I can log out of the application. And for the most part, that's about it. So I plan to go ahead and redo some of this, possibly make it a little bit more friendlier. But, you know, this basically is using Kubernetes right now, and it's using my Docker hub, which you probably really want to do when you're deploying all this stuff to Kubernetes, because the ideal thing is that For your Kubernetes, you definitely want to pull your images from an image repo within your Kubernetes thing here. I also notice I've got, through all my testing and stuff like that, I've got some images that I need to prune as well. So it, pretty brute force, but it's the first phase on this, getting this up and running in Kubernetes. So Docker image prune. I thought it was Docker prune image. What? Hold on one second here. Oh, that's right. You do Docker container prune, but not Docker image prune. So as you can say right there, prune my stopped containers right there. And then I want to do Docker prune, which will just do all of your Docker image prune. There we go. Not sure what was going on there, but that's about it. Stay tuned for another video on this. Thanks.